So now we have to go ahead. In the previous session, we understood that for every transaction, we'll basically have two different accounts getting affected. And based on those two accounts, we'll decide what account need to be debited and what account need to be credited. And for that purpose, uh, we first analyzed that whether it is a cash transaction or a credit transaction. Once we did the analysis of whether it is a cash transaction or a credit transaction, based on that, we tried to identify that whether the accounts getting affected are correct or not. And based on that, we decided that which account need to be debited and which account need to be credited. Then today we have to basically talk about the different journal entries that we are supposed to pass for the transactions, because all the transactions, when to be recorded in the books of accounts, have to be recorded through something called as a journal. And that's what we have to talk about now. That is, how do we pass these journal entries? How does these journal entries are recorded, and how do we do the posting of these journal entries in the books of accounts? On top of that, we'll also be required to understand that what is an account and how do we do the balancing of an account. There are some of you who have the problem, especially with balancing of the account also. So we'll be discussing that in this particular part of our discussion. One, we have to talk about the journal entries. Two, we have to talk about the ledger posting of those journal entries. Three, we have to talk about the balancing of those ledger accounts. So let's understand, let's start observing that. The very first part, how do I write the journal entry? There is a specific format of journal entries that we are going to follow. And with the help of that format only, we'll be understanding the posting effects of the various journal entries also. All right. So let's try to observe it. Let me share the screen first. That's what I said, that today this is the issue. Okay. So let's say the transaction was something like this. Cash paid to Raja rupees 6,000. Let's say this is a transaction in front of us, and we need to do the accounting for this transaction. Every transaction will first be recorded in journal. From the journal, there will be the posting of that transaction to the ledger. Now, in transaction, if you could observe, this being a cash transaction, there are two accounts getting affected, which are cash and Raja. Correct or not? Wherein your cash account is real account, Raja account is a personal account. Cash is going out, so cash will be credited. Raja being a person is the receiver of benefit, therefore Raja will be debited. Let's say this transaction took place on, what was the date today? 18th June of 2020. So what is the format of journal? The format of journal covers something like this. The very first is the date of transaction. For every transaction, you will first be having the specific date. And these transactions in journal are recorded in the chronological order, that is in the sequential manner of date. Then particulars of that transaction, wherein we write the details of that transaction. Then debit amount and the credit amount. Sir, can I write 18th June 2020? Yes. There are multiple formats which we can follow for the purpose of recording the transactions. First, whenever we are writing the entry in journal, we have to first write the account to be debited. So we will write Raja account, identify that it is debited. Debit. DR means debit record. Rupees 6,000, because the account need to be debited, therefore amount will be written in the debit column. To cash account, and we don't write CR in front of it, to cash account, because to itself identifies that this is a credit effect of the transaction. And then we have to write a brief explanation about this transaction. Why? Because we are not going to refer these accounts on an everyday basis. We are not going to do the revision of it. These accounts may be referred at the year end, maybe some 2 years later. If there is a doubt, then these accounts will be opened. उस समय हमको समझ में आना चाहिए कि account में transaction क्या हुआ था, उसका purpose क्या था, उसका basis क्या था. And for that purpose, we have to write the brief explanation about the transaction. We call that as narration. And narration being, because we are recording the history, therefore narration starts with being. Being cash paid against. Now, how do you write the narration in the examination? Based on what is the statement given to you in the examination. Based on that only you have to decide that how do you write the narration. So here we understood how do we record the journal entry. Now these journal entries need to be posted to the ledger account, because सिर्फ journal entry में record करके या journal को journal book में record करके कोई फायदा नहीं है. क्योंकि जब तक आप इस ट्रांजैक्शन का लेजर पोस्टिंग नहीं कर देते, लेजर पोस्टिंग करने के बाद में जब तक उसका आपको फाइनल इफेक्ट नहीं मिल जाता, तब तक यू विल नॉट बी एबल टू असेस, यू विल नॉट बी एबल टू अंडरस्टैंड द अल्टीमेट बैलेंसेस ऑफ द लेजर अकाउंट्स. And for that purpose, you need to do the posting of these transactions. इसीलिए मैं जब रेगुलर लेक्चर्स ले रहा था तो मैंने कुछ फ्लो बताया था आपको, that there is an event first. This event get converted into transaction. The transaction is either recorded in the subsidiary book or journal. In fact, subsidiary book is nothing but the journal only. But those are the specific nature of journals. From subsidiary book or journal, the transaction is posted to the ledger. Ledger is nothing but the book containing various accounts. And based on this ledger, you are going to prepare the trial balance. In the recent lecture of my regular batches, I have covered this trial balance concept also. So this is what you are supposed to go with. This is a flow of transactions that we have to follow. So we are going to follow the same thing. So in the given case, we'll be requiring two different accounts. One will be needing Raja account and two will be needing the cash account. Correct? Now, what are the columns in the ledger? You will be having two parts of it. Every ledger will have two parts. One will be the debit part and second will be the credit part of that account. The debit part will focus on the effects of the debit side and the credit part will be focusing on the effects of the credit side. So if this is Raja account, we'll have the columns as what? Date, particulars, and amount in rupees. Here we don't write debit or credit in the amount column, but we write on the top of the ledger account. On the debit side, we write DR. On the credit side, we write CR. The debit side ka DR represents debit records and the credit side ka CR represents credit record. So on the credit side also we'll have the same columns: date, particulars, and amount in rupees. Right? Okay. So what will we have onto the debit side and what we will have onto the credit side? If you could observe in the given transaction, Raja need to be debited. Debited का मतलब क्या? मैंने कहा था something to be written on the debit side of the account. That means the account is debited. So as Raja account is being debited, so therefore we'll go to the debit side of Raja's account. We'll write what? The date of the transaction, 2020. June 18. As what? The reference of the account to be credited. इस अकाउंट को किसकी वजह से डेबिट किया? तो कैश की वजह से. To cash. How much? 6,000 is the amount by which the account need to be debited or not. Reference credit वाले account का, but amount उसी account की. Is it right? And similarly, I'll go to the cash account onto the credit side. I'll write the same date because the two effects have to be completed on both the sides. June 18 by Raja. The reference of the account because of which the transaction, the reference of the account because of which this account need to be credited. That is 6,000. I hope this basic is clear for everyone now. That how do we do the journal entries and how do we do the posting of those entries into the various accounts. Am I right? Okay. Now what we'll do is we have a question on hand for which we'll do these all journal entries, and based on that we will try to observe the various ledger accounts also. If you could check out the last question of your class book, which has been shared with you already, from which you did question number 10 also already. In this question, they've given journalize the following transactions in the books of Sri Ganesh. Transactions dated 2018 April 1st to April 31st. April 30 होता है, April 31st नहीं होता है, right? Transactions are what? Sri Ganesh started his business with cash 50,000. Purchased goods 5,000, purchased goods for cash 10,000, purchased goods from Sun for cash 15,000, sold goods for cash, sold goods to Sky. So purchased goods from Moon, purchased goods from Star on credit, sold goods to Mr. C, sold goods to Mr. Ocean on credit. Mr. C returned goods to Mr. Moon, received from Mr. C, allowed him a discount, paid to Moon, allowed him a discount allowed by him, withdrew cash for personal use, withdrew goods for private use, paid salary to Sevakram, an employee, paid rent to Mr. Estate, landlord. All right. So these are the various transactions which have been given. Some cash transactions, some credit transactions. For these all transactions, we will first make the journal entries, and based on that journal entries, we will prepare the various ledger accounts. We need to prepare the various ledger accounts, because with the help of that various ledger accounts only, we'll be doing the balancing of those ledger accounts. Am I clear? I'll try doing some of the journal entries for you in this case. The remaining ones you can try out on yourself, and then you need to do the ledger posting also for those various transactions. So let me form the various parts of this first. We'll first prepare the journal. This is about question 11 on page. अदरवाइज बाद में हम ढूंढते रहेंगे सवाल मिला कहां से था. 4.6. So I have the journal, the columns of which are, of course, I'm not going to write all the journal entries. You will be finishing it. Just to start with, I'll do it. Date, particulars, debit amount, and credit amount. Journal of Sri Ganesh. We'll have the columns as what? Date, particulars, debit, rupees, credit, rupees. Am I right? The very first transaction is 2018 April 1st. Do not say April Fool, that is the new date of the financial year. Started his business with cash, rupees 50,000. Now, when he has started his business with cash, rupees 50,000, that simply indicates that it is the capital which has been brought in, because we have to follow the business entity concept. Therefore, this amount will be credited to his new account, that is the capital account. So what will be my entry? My entry will be cash coming in. So cash account debit. Look at it from the perspective of business, not from the perspective of Sri Ganesh individual. 2. गणेशेस कैपिटल, चाय का दुकान लगा रहा है, 50,000 रुपए लाए हैं, 50,000 रुपए, करेक्ट. We will be required to write the narration. Narration will be what? Being the business started, investing cash. You get this? This is how you'll be completing that particular narration. The next transaction is purchased goods rupees 5,000. That is on April 2nd. The purchased goods rupees 5,000. They have not given anything else, so it becomes a cash transaction or not? Because cash or credit not mentioned, name of the person is also not given, so it will automatically become a cash transaction. So April 2nd. Even if you would not have written April, if you would have written only the date, until the time the date does not change, that particular date has not to be repeated. Entry will be purchase account debit, because whenever there is a purchase or sale of goods, I told you that on purchase of goods, the account getting affected will be purchase account. On sale of goods, the account getting affected will be the sales account. To cash account being goods purchased, invoice means bill number rupees 5,000 and 5,000 respectively. All right. Then the next transaction is purchased goods for cash. Very specifically mentioned, purchased goods for cash. तो यहां तो कोई दिक्कत ही नहीं है. We'll directly pass the entry. What's the date? April 3rd. April 3rd. Entry will be purchase account debit to cash rupees 10,000 debit, 10,000 credit, being cash purchases. You can write any of the narration, there is no problem. Invoice number ... Am I right? Then on April 4th, purchased goods from Sun for cash. Same transaction, even though the name of person is given, but then also we'll ignore it because it is a cash transaction. So April 4th, purchase account debit 15,000 to cash account 15,000 being cash purchases from Sun. Is it right? So what you are supposed to do, you have to write the various journal entries. And then the way we did the posting here into the two accounts, likewise for every transaction, you'll be doing the posting to those respective accounts. But mind it, my dear friends, In this particular case, if you could observe, there are three different purchases for cash. So in the three different journal entries, you have got purchase account and cash account getting affected again and again. So we will not be preparing a separate purchase account for each transaction. Multiple transactions are clubbed together into a single account. That's why we say an account is basically a summary of different transactions related to the person or to the given activity. And therefore, here, as there are multiple transactions related to cash, related to purchases, we will be preparing one purchase account in which all the effects will be given. We'll be preparing one cash account in which all the debit as well as credit effects will be given. And then we'll be doing the ledger balancing of those accounts based on that. So now you have got the homework of what? Of remaining transactions related to the journal entry. You have to do all these journal entries one by one. And then based on those journal entries, you have to do the posting of those transactions to the ledger accounts. And once you are done with the journal entries and the posting thereof, you will be able to understand how do we do the balancing. क्योंकि कुछ लोगों के लिए दिक्कत थी, अगर आपका पहला दिन याद होगा कि balance brought down, balance carried down वगैरह कैसे करते हैं. So that thing is what we are going to learn in that process of ledger balancing. I'll try to wind it up here itself. You have got the homework, you have to finish that particular part. In tomorrow's session, we'll be talking about that ledger balancing, and also I'll be talking about that compound transactions in tomorrow's lecture. Compound transactions means a transaction involving more than two accounts. That is what we call as the compound transactions. That aspect we are going to talk about tomorrow. And we'll go ahead with the subsidiary book in the next lecture. Thank you for today. If anyone has a question, they can raise it right away. Else we'll meet tomorrow. Okay. So we will meet tomorrow. Thank you.